Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us this afternoon, this morning, or this evening, depending on where you're joining us from, to listen to young peace builders around the world who are passionate about peace and who want to give their opinions on a very recent resolution that the UN recently passed, the resolution 2535. I'm here today joined by Mridul from India, and he's going to introduce himself. We have Leonardo from Colombia, and we also have Shadi from Iran, and all of them are really vibrant young peace builders who have been working in this field for a while, and I believe their insights on how this resolution can be implemented in their context is going to help us to see how we can all capitalize and make use of this resolution. First of all, my name is Christian Chito. I'm the founder of Peacemaker 360, a communication and profit that started in 2016 and that promotes young peace builder stories through social media. And I also work with Conducive Space for Peace, which is a Danish-based organization that seeks to create spaces of dialogue to promote the agency of local peace builders. And today I'm really honored to meet all of these amazing young peace builders. They're all my friends, and I've just told them a few minutes ago that there's no greater joy than hopping on a live streaming and realizing that you're just talking to your friends. So I'm gonna start with Mridul, if you wanna give us a real quick introduction, where you're calling us from and which organization you work with.
Sure. So hi everyone, I'm currently joining from India. I'm co-founder of Youth for Peace International and Asia coordinator of UNOY Peacebuilders. I have been working in this field of youth peace building through different instruments: peace education, advocacy, activism, humanitarian support, networking, capacity building of different stakeholders. And it's a pleasure to be here. All of you people, like, so much inspiration there is, and I'm looking forward to this session.
Thank you very much, Mridul. Let's hear from Shadi as well, if you may want to. Shadi, can you hear us? As Shadi is trying to respond, maybe let's pick from Leonardo and see if you can hear us. Can you hear us, Leo?
Yeah, sure. So, can you hear me?
Yep, absolutely.
Great. Sure. So hello everyone.
This is Shadi.
Oh.
And yes, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Sorry, there was a little delay there, but you can go ahead. You're good. All right. Unfortunately, we've lost Shadi for the moment, but hopefully she's going to be able to join us. Leonardo, please go ahead as Shadi tries to connect again.
Yeah, sure. So hello everyone. My name is Leonardo Parrago. I'm currently based in Bogota, Colombia, and I work with an organization called the Bogota Art Foundation. What we do is promoting peace building and reconciliation through creative activities and through the arts. And I'm also engaged with a campaign called Letters for Reconciliation and Letters for Healing. And the idea is to be able to connect different people through messages of solidarity, empathy, and hope. And the idea is through this exercise to be able to generate more connection between people. And finally, I'm currently the youth ambassador of the Peace Palace. So through this role, I'm promoting more youth engagement in peace building. That's it. Happy to join you here.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Leo, for that kind introduction, and congratulations for making it so early in the morning. I know it's so early for you in Bogota to run this call. Let's try to get in Shadi in the call. But as we do so, maybe just quickly jumping into it, because I think it will help us to kind of get a little bit of the background of this resolution. And I thought it would be useful if any of you would like to tell us, where does this resolution come from? What is the history of it? And as we do that, I will try to get our friend Shadi as well on the call. So if anyone wants to just quickly give us a little bit of a background of where this resolution comes from and who were behind this great framework, that would be really, really helpful. Also, thank you to all our online viewers who are joining in. Please, if you have any comments or questions, do not hesitate to share. We are here to learn from each other. And also, if you have any comments on this resolution and how you think you can implement it in your region or in your context, please feel free to share that as well in the comments section. Let's go a little bit into the history. Mridul, maybe you want to tell us a little bit more about where this resolution comes from.
Sure, I think Leo will be in a better position to tell about 2535, but I can maybe give a small, let's say, time history. So there have been these conversations, these narratives for young people to be considered as victim of the violence or perpetrator of the violence. And then young people didn't feel connect to these popular narratives. And because of the approach, when you frame these narratives and the kind of approach then you use, it becomes challenging to accept those approaches for yourself or accept those approaches for our friends. And I think that's where a lot of young people started coming in, having these discussions that they do not agree to these narratives. And I think this is a wrong approach how young people are being considered. So they're like, no, we need a progressive language. We need to understand how young peacebuilders work, why they work. And that's where there was a lot of advocacy, lot of consultation. And finally, during the Jordan consultation, there was the time, hi Shadi, you're back, great. So now it's working. So I'm just filling it up, and maybe then Shadi will also be able to help. So yeah, there was this space where we were having a lot of consultations, a lot of young people all over the world. And when the outcome report of this consultation was presented to United Nations Security Council in 2015, it was accepted as a resolution by the Security Council on 9 December 2015. It became a resolution 2250, a landmarking resolution. And since then, we have based a lot of our approach, lot of our work on how we make more awareness around this issue, how we can engage more different stakeholders other than young peacebuilders who themselves are actually very active and very passionate about this, and also try to get a progressive language, progressive understanding around these topics. And it takes time. It doesn't happen in just one go, and that's why I think we got this resolution 2250 in 2015, and then we got 2419 in 2018, and now we are having this 2535 in 2020. So maybe more about the journey Leo and Shadi can share.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mridul, for that really important background, because it helps at least to contextualize this resolution in terms of the previous efforts that were done with respect to youth peace and security. And you've highlighted there how it actually builds on the continuum of Resolution 2250 and Resolution 2419. But maybe if there's any other points that Leo or Shadi first would like to add, but starting with Shadi, introduce yourself. Sorry, we had a little bit of technical difficulty there. Tell us where you're calling from. And yeah, if you want to jump into this context, share us a little bit more about where this resolution fits in the history.
Sure. I hope everyone can hear me and see me now. If there is not a technical problem, it's not a good webinar. Keep that in mind. My name is Shadi, and I'm from Iran. I'm based in Italy right now, finishing my studies in migration and mediation. And I'm also the founder of Peace Mentors. It's a youth-led, well, young women-led organization in Iran that focuses on leadership and peace education. It's a true great honor to be part of you all today among young peace builders and good friends, as Chris was saying. And I think above all, this resolution is us. It's the journey of young people asking for the space that would facilitate what they're already doing and doing very well in their contexts. And I would like to maybe start adding a little bit of background on which governments took this resolution to the Security Council. It was the government of France and the Dominican Republic. So our extended gratitude goes that way as well for taking the time to consult with young people and to hear their journey, especially in the times with COVID-19 affecting all of us really in challenging contexts in different places. So I'm very glad to know that there are diverse countries from across the globe championing for these resolutions from different regions, and this resolution and this whole youth, peace, and security agenda becoming more of like a global, let's say, a global discourse. Because having lived and worked in Europe now for 2 years, I see that it's not as highlighted as it should be. And I used to think it's because there is very little conflict here, but then slowly everyone is catching up with the momentum, and governments of different countries are recognizing, member states are recognizing the importance of youth, peace, and security. So I'll pass to Leo. I think he could give us definitely some great input as well.
Sure, thank you so much, Shadi. What I would like to add is that the source for this resolution also comes from the first global symposium on the role of young people in peace building that took place in Helsinki in March last year. I think that was also a stepping stone to keep moving forward. And there we had the We Are Here report presented, which basically highlights how young people can participate in peace processes in 3 different modalities: um, at the table, outside the table, and outside the room. And basically, through these types of engagement, they can influence how a peace process is going to move forward. Now, having a look at that, and through the engagement of different governments, this symposium was held by the government of Colombia, Qatar, and Finland. This started to lead the way to think, okay, now we have tagged that young people are important in peace building. We have said that we need more ways to engage them. What's missing there? And I think another important piece is the just in that very direction, the missing piece report presented as well last year, in which it said, like, yeah, like, we have the resolutions, but how are they being implemented? How are they taken to the ground, to the grassroots, to where young people is working? So this resolution a little bit is creating that framework where it becomes once again more youth friendly, and there are these mechanisms for young people to really be able to access its benefits. So I will just quickly mention some 3 key points. First, that there is a plan to have UN youth focal points. I think that's really important for young people to start to have someone to talk about peace within the UN system, and that can help them to move project forward. The second one, it's having more funded, specifically directed to youth peace building activities. I think that's really key in order to really be able to move forward with creating larger projects. And the third one is direct participation in the implementation and planning of these peace processes. I think that really gives the light and sheds the light on the possibilities that young people have to really be engaged there. And also attached to it, the reporting mechanisms that are connected with how young people are being taking part in this process and which are the results. So these for me are the key pillars that are covered here. that were not really highlighted in previous resolutions.
Thank you very much, Leo. And thank you so much to all of you, actually, for a bit of a background and a context on how this resolution came to be. You've also talked that it's also linked to the missing peace report that was published, I think, last year or the previous year, that looks at the implementation of Resolution 2250 and some of the gaps that it's facing in terms of being implemented in country. Shadi, you've also talked about the role of the Dominican Republic government and France's government in moving forward this resolution. And Mridul, you've also given us actually how this framework connects to the previous framework. And I'm reading from Mridul's recent Facebook post where he's saying that, well, first of all, we had Resolution 2215, 2015, 2 years later or 3 years later, we have Resolution 2419. And now we're having Resolution 2020. So it's quite easy for someone who is not familiar with these resolutions and who's not familiar with YPS, the Youth, Peace and Security Agenda, to start feeling like there's just an amalgamation, or just a momentum on having more resolutions and not necessarily having real meaningful youth participation in peace building processes. I don't know if that's the kind of reading that you guys have, but if you may probably give us some light, Mridul, what do you think are the key differences that these resolutions have? How are they different from each other? And why is this resolution really important? Why should we have another resolution if we already have two on youth, peace and security?
Yeah, thanks. Right, I think this is where I had finished my previous point, that we need this progressive language sometimes, the kind of implementation that we want for youth, peace and security agenda all over the world, that need like these small steps to be made. At a different point of time, those steps become even more important to make. So let's say we could convince somehow, or young people, some points could come in the main resolution 2250. Maybe somehow we improve the language and we focus more on peace processes. So while youth, peace and security agenda is a larger agenda, but then we have peace processes specifically. So 2419 resolution specifically focus on young people's meaningful participation to peace processes. And now here we are talking about, of course, peace processes, peace building, but then we change, like we increase the agenda towards humanitarian responses, for an example. This is the first time when we are bringing this nexus approach where young people can engage in humanitarian responses also. But this is just one of the points. There are many other points, like Leo mentioned, that this also talks about these, like how he was talking about, sorry, I missed that point, Leo. I think there were 2 points which were like you were mentioning. One was about young people's engagement in creating these roadmaps. So we have these instruments, we have these implementation strategies, but what can be done more? So this looks like little more action oriented resolution, where we are talking about, okay, if we have the resolutions, I think there need to be dedicated youth inclusive participatory local, national and regional roadmaps that need to be created, and that need to be sufficiently funded. So I think that's a different approach, and that's how you are like going a little further than what you have previously committed. Second, it talks about protection of civic spaces and political spaces for young people. This is also very key, because these days we are seeing that young people are trying to do a lot of work in their context, and we are finding that they, because of these narratives, they are not being treated very well. They have a lot of different kind of threats, social, political, economical, all those kind of threats that they have. And these threats are hampering them to work in this space, and sometimes these are life-threatening threats also. Sometimes these threats are coming from, let's say, their peers, or the wider audience when they are conversing with, that can be a like simple hate speech, and sometimes this can be come by political institutions or by the government itself. So I think having that kind of language, a stronger language, and having a global consensus around it, that's something again very important. So these are the three important points that I would say. One is engaging humanitarian, like including humanitarian spaces. Second is creating these roadmaps, and third is the protection pillar, which has been added very strongly. And I think more Shadi and Leo, they were more engaged in these consultations, so they can help us getting more insights to it.
Indeed. Shadi, do you also want to jump in and give us some clues if there's any additional insights on how different is this framework from the previous ones, and what is the value, the added value that it brings on the YPS agenda? Sorry, Shadi, we can't hear you. If you can unmute yourself.
I think you're muted, Shadi.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay. So Mridul really showed a great panorama of the resolution and highlighted several points that I think are really paramount. But I'm just going to add, coming from personal experience of working in a complex context, that the thing about this resolution that I would call nice is that it's engaging many different levels of a society, and it has a more holistic approach to it. When we presented 2250 to the UN offices and UN agencies in Iran, they said there's no open conflict, and that was in 2017 and 2018. And there is no open conflict in this country, and youth peace and security is not our priority. So we do not intend to work with projects or ideas, and it was quite easily dismissed by UNFPA in Iran, which is one of the UN agencies basically in Asia and Pacific. The MENA region is one of the agencies, along with UNDP, that champions the youth peace and security agenda. So now that we have a resolution that has a more holistic focus, which means that it's calling upon youth, upon the member states, upon civil society organizations, and even conflict parties. Like, this was really the best when I was reading it. It was actually calling conflict parties to be more careful about what's happening to youth in terms of violence, and that was interesting to me, along with the other side of the, let's say, of the field, with the commission, the peacebuilding commission, and the Secretary General envoy on youth, and all the other UN bodies, and even the Secretary General himself, which of course is not that surprising. But having all of these different groups and different people positioned together in this resolution, I think is definitely an added value, which was unprecedented in the former ones. And I think one other point that it can bring is that when we were trying to consult with the, let's say, with the behind the scenes for this resolution to happen, the protection pillar was really important, because you can't be asking people to go out there, young people especially, who have a couple of years ahead of them, more years than the older people who've already spent their best years of youth in high positions, and then not protect them and be like, you're important in building peace, but we don't really care what happens to you. Just go do your duty, and whatever happens. So I'm pretty pleased and pretty happy to see the protection pillar being emphasized, and also civic spaces, because these really go hand in hand. And if you want to make a change in any context, civic spaces are really inevitable to be touched. The only thing that really concerns me is that and I think we all agree that a resolution without implementation is just another piece of paper. I mean, we can print it and then keep it, wallpaper our rooms with it, but as long as we do not render all these bodies that I mentioned accountable, it's not going to go as far as it is supposed to go, and create as much impact as it is supposed to. So this was really what I found really interesting and worth sharing, and I think Leo definitely can complement it with much more from his context as well.
And before maybe Leo jumps on that train, I think there's a couple of points that I also want to jump on to just highlight for our viewers who are joining and probably were not very familiar with these resolutions. You've pointed out, both Mridul and Shadi, that this resolution actually brings in a lot of actors together to look at the role of youth peace builders in the context that they're working in. It emphasizes the protection pillar and increasing the participation of youth in civic spaces. It also looks at, more specifically within the context of the COVID pandemic, how young peace builders have played and are still playing a key role in responding to humanitarian needs. And earlier on, Leonardo, you've also highlighted that this resolution actually has been very clear on pointing to having within the UN system a focal point that will respond or will be responsible to addressing youth needs. Maybe if you can contextualize it in your own context in Colombia. We know Colombia is going through a peace process right now. The UN there has been playing a key role in participating or in advancing the peace process that was started in 2015 with the government of Santos. Can you tell us a little bit more? How do you see this playing out in your Colombian context? Where do you think these actors, who are the multi-actors that you think will need to come together, and which institutions need to really play a key role in making sure this framework is actual, so that we can actually respond to Shadi's concern, which is, if we just have a paper, it's just going to remain on our shelves. But how do we make this reality in your context?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a great question, and following on Shadi's point, like same as with human rights, if we just look at them and see how beautiful they look on paper, I mean, it's nice, it's inspirational, but then again, it's not changing anyone's life. So I mean, the only way to really make it meaningful is by implementing it. Now, when it comes to this resolution, I would like to say a couple of things on how it plays out in the Colombian context. For me, one particular thing is that when it comes to the implementation of the peace agreement, and the peace agreement here is implemented through a multi-actor kind of framework, it requires the UN system, the Colombian government, other multilateral agencies like OAS. So in that sense, it's not like Colombian peace agreement is just Colombian peace agreements, but there are other actors who are helping in its implementation. For example, through the UN verification mission, they are helping to see, like, okay, are we really complying and implementing all the different points highlighted in the agreement, and how's that implementation process going like? So in that sense, like with this resolution, there's another additional part to it that was never included before, and it's like, well, now it's not just implementing this agreement as it was supposed to be. Now we need to have this youth-friendly framework as well to do this implementation. And it's not just about saying, like, yeah, young people are super important in the peace agreement implementation. It's like, go ahead and do it. Like, how are you going to partner with you to be able to implement it? And I guess, like, that's the big change, because before it was more about just saying, like, yeah, young people are super important. Maybe U.S. governments can consider this and that and that. In this case, it's like, we see a really great importance in having young people really active there. So, like, make sure to do that. And I think that stronger language, as Mridul was saying, really helps to go in that direction. It's not like it's desirable to have young people there, but it's more like, it's needed. So in that sense, and looking at the Colombian context, the implications will be that through all the 6 points of the peace agreement that was signed here in 2016, I think like there are really good opportunities for young people to really keep active there. And just to give a quick example, so for example, when it comes to land redistribution, right, and giving it back to the rural workers, so the government have said that so far they have obtained like 1,000 acres of land, um, which is a great thing, right? Like it's a big portion of land to give back to rural communities. Yet, I mean, like something that is the concern of everyone is like, why not even 1 acre has been given to these rural workers so far? If they have, you know, amassed this big amount. So in that sense, we can see that, yeah, you know, like there might be some things that are being done, but we as young people can notice like, hey, I mean, there's definitely a missing piece here to make it happen, to make it actualize. So in that sense, like if we as young people sort of become one with the peace agreement and like the implications of it, it's easier to achieve it. And with the support, for example, of UN offices on the ground having a youth focal point that says to the government, hey, you know, like we have these youth concerns, how can we go about it and implement this part? I think it's easier than if you go just as one young person or one youth organization saying to the government, look, we think this is important, and then like, well, you know, the classic procedure is like you just get ignored and
Yeah.
life keeps going on. So in this sense, like I think it gives more power to young people.
Indeed, it gives more power to young people, and I'd like to bring in Mridul here. Leonardo has given us a little bit of a landscape of what this implementation would look like in the Colombian context. But what would it mean for the Asia context? I know, Mridul, you're involved with the United Network of Young Peace Builders, and one of the strategies that has been at least advanced to implementing these YPS resolutions has been actually creating a youth national strategy that brings policymakers to start putting at the center of discussions youth needs and youth participation. I wonder if you can give us a little bit of the Asia region, how much of national strategy has been brought forward, and what do you think this resolution is going to do to making sure that this youth national strategy is actually giving a boost in your context?
Sure. So different countries are working differently. I think there are two countries which are leading the development of youth strategies. One is Philippines. They have already done a lot of consultations. They have brought together young people. And then a second one where they are trying to have more conversation toward peace processes, that's Myanmar. These are the two countries. Then we talk about Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has tried to create these resolutions very early, like I think in 2016 itself. They started building upon the bringing the different stakeholders together and having conversations around it. In India also, we are trying to create the networks. So the idea is to try to see that just creating roadmaps is not sufficient. There have been a lot of roadmaps. It is important that these roadmaps are participatory and enough, like sufficiently youth-led. So the process need to come from that lenses. So even if, let's say, one country is trying to create roadmaps and not engaging young people in a decision-making process, they might be consulting them. But when we go with the hard ladder of participation, we know that consultation is not the best form of meaningful participation. So we need to see how these processes, these spaces can be owned, can be led by young people, and then there is a enough sufficient monitoring and evaluation kind of mechanism, which are actually mentioned in the resolution 2535. So that's one. Then what Shadi was saying, yeah, so why this is important is also related to Leo's point, because when you talk about multi generational spaces and you try to bring different stakeholders together, I think these coalitions are even more important to create strategies. First you need to create coalitions, you discuss, you thoroughly discuss it, and then only you come to a roadmap. So that's one. Then what Shadi was saying, I think in many countries in Asia, and I think that's happening all over the world, where the political parties are trying to play with the emotions of the public, and that's where there is a lot of hate being created if you are even talking about certain kind of even democratic values or constitutional values. That's also becoming a challenge. Like country like India is very well talking about fraternity, justice. But when you talk about fraternity, justice in real world, in real sense, you feel a lot of challenge. Same happens with liberty, let's say, for America. So those kind of things. And here, that's a challenge. So when we talk about these things and we are not able to implement it, then people's protection is always an issue. So young people who are getting engaged in these spaces, it is as relevant as, let's say, in MENA region or Americas or Asia. So that's also very much relevant. Now I'm talking about specifically, let's say, the country which I know more, which is India. So there were 2 or 3 points which I really liked from this resolution. If it gets implemented, I think there will be a very strong positive language towards this. So one is about that it recognizes the structural barriers also. It is not just talking about a few, let's say, issues, but it also talks about these, what is there in the institution which is stopping young people's participation. And I think that's very much important. If we talk about India, only 1.5% of parliamentarians are aged under 30 years old. So let's say if we go with the population, then we have somewhere around 22 to 25% of the population of the country, which is 18 to 29 years old. But we are having 1.5%, let's say, parliamentarians in this age group. So thinking from the structural lens, what is creating those barriers? Then second point is that it also talks about psychological recovery of young people. Be it the peace builders who are working, be it the people who have been affected or the victims. So when we talk about, let's say, this big issue in India, which is, let's say, this Kashmir issue, then trying to see that young people might be also looking for reconciliation and psychological recovery. So seeing from that lens is also a huge step. And we talk about the larger picture in India, then I think this can also help us in see like giving more attention to mental health and the kind of stress that young people are going through because of a lot happening around peace and security. And third, it talks about the local youth participation in reconstruction. So whenever these communities, be it community, let's say in Colombia, or I talk about, let's say, Kashmir, or I talk about Northeast India, then the local people themselves who have been a victim of all of these conflicts, how they themselves can play a very key and important role in reconstruction of the society. So I think these things are very, very important for any local community, trying to understand structural barriers, trying to see the psychological recovery, and trying to see the young people's participation in this restructuring of the entire community, which has been affected by conflict.
Great points indeed, Mridul. And I think this is really very helpful, at least in terms of just really pointing to where this resolution can be helpful, not just in the Indian context, but I feel like these issues that you've raised that are structural are actually cross-cutting in several contexts. Like political participation is still quite limited in many countries, psychological barriers and trauma that youth go through as they engage in peace building is quite unaddressed. You've also talked about local participation and local youth participation in the reconstruction phase. Now, I think one thing that I would like to land to you is also questions that are coming from our participants and viewers online. Thank you so much, Irene. Thank you so much, Farida, who have also been jumping into the conversation. I'm bringing a question from Farida from Afghanistan, who has something who says this. Throughout the 5 years, there have been 3 resolutions, which is great. But don't you think that there is not enough time and space between the adoption of the resolution when it comes to especially conflict zone countries, since raising the awareness is also time consuming in addition to implementation itself? If not, what can help speed up the process so that these resolutions actually have effective results on the ground? So Farida's concern really is we're having a lot of great resolutions, but the time is quite limiting when it comes to making these resolutions known. I still remember that at least within the YPS community, we're still working on creating awareness on Resolution 2250 and Resolution 2415. Now, the question of how do we make sure that we are time-wise, smart enough so that we are not just bringing up resolutions that are not going to be known by people and that are going to take also a long time to be implemented. I don't know if there's anyone who has a comment to that. Maybe Shadi or Leo, if you want to jump on it.
Leo,
Yeah,
hand raised, so go ahead.
yeah, I like to go there. So I would like to compare it with the women, peace, and security resolution. I think that's a really, important way to start and frame it. So like we've seen that since the first resolution back in 2000, so it's been 20 years now. There have been like 20 resolutions, I think, around women, peace, and security. And while even the first resolution, we cannot say that it's fully implemented, it really helps to highlight like, okay, this is something important, this is something that we care about, there's always something additional to do, but we need to really take this into consideration. So even if it's not possible to get each resolution implemented right away, I think each extra resolution is sending the message that, okay, this is the direction in which we need to go, and it's important that we keep that in mind, and reminding actors like if we're passing a resolution almost like every 1 year, 2 years, it's saying like, okay, this is a topic that we care about and we need to keep investing and doing things and moving forward here. So for me, what it represents is like, of course, there's a lot of work to do when it comes to getting the word out about these resolutions. I mean, in the Colombian context, to give an example, really concrete example, when I talked with the head of the, let's say, Colombian youth policies at an organization called Colombia Joven, she was not aware at all that these resolutions exist and that there's a youth peace and security agenda. And it was the same when I was engaging with people at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I can keep going talking about agencies, but the point is like the resolutions are out there, but the government and several UN agencies on the ground are not aware that this is happening. So there's need to be a lot of education work in terms of making sure that we're on the same page when it comes to these resolutions. And on that point, I like to highlight something about this new resolution, which I think is super important, and is the recognition that education is really important to move forward this agenda. They say that we need more investment in education, education overall, but as well like creating this kind of education about the importance of young people in peace processes in general. So I think like that's a great way to keep moving forward, like with reports as we are here, highlighting how young people are really creating this change in their communities. And the more information and real data and evidence-based kind of reports that we have highlighting this, the better will be as a community to move this agenda forward.
Indeed, thank you very much for highlighting that. I think the key message that I take from your comment, Leo, is that it does not really hurt to have many resolutions so long as the message of youth participation and youth engagement in peace building processes is really resounding, because they all build up, just like you've given the example of the women peace and security resolutions. They have been building up to actually advance the agenda of women participation in peace building processes. Now we are almost nearing the end of our session today. Thank you so much for Mridul. Thank you to Leo. Thank you to Shadi for accepting this invitation to actually enlighten all of us on this powerful and important resolution. But as we kind of wrap up, I would like also to maybe bring Shadi in the call. You started by also highlighting that a new resolution is just a piece of paper on the shelf that is not going to add so much value. And Mridul, of course, you've also highlighted some challenges already that you see youth participation facing in the Asia context, in India. You talked about some structural challenges, but very specifically, if you may, Shadi, what do you think is going to be an important obstacle that, or a significant obstacle that this resolution is going to face in your Iranian context? And how do you think maybe youth peace builders themselves can be involved in, as we've been talking about, raising awareness? How do you think they can be involved in raising awareness about this resolution this time?
So when I got the invitation for this call, I contextualized myself as a young Iranian woman in the MENA region. So it would be a little bit unfair and unjust of me to not speak, not on the behalf, but at least trying to share the burdens that young people in my region have. We're, I think, among the top three youngest populations in the world, the first one being Africa. And the challenges and the obstacles that are that we are facing, and Iran is included in the whole package, I would say, is the first and the foremost, I think, is the fact that there are many conflicts going on. So if I want to start and count, is that there is Yemen, the world's biggest humanitarian crisis. There is Libya, there is Syria, there is Iraq, there is Palestine. And then we have what I don't want to call exactly fragile states, because that is a terminology within legal discourse. But we have Lebanon, which is kind of in a very shaky period. We have Egypt, that has become a more authoritarian, let's say, country. There is Algeria with 9 months long movements of the Iraq. There is Iran with the tensions with the US, which is my country. And basically, if we go into the discourses of our region, every country has its, let's say, challenges with conflict. And then we also have Jordan and Tunisia that are really working well through a democratic transition, and championing, of course, the 2250. So the fact that there are instabilities and conflicts that are happening in this region, and Iran included, could be very challenging. And the other problem that we have is a lot of technological barriers, because when we're speaking about spreading awareness on this resolution, we have to keep into account, especially with COVID, there's, let's say, fewer opportunities for going and spreading awareness on the ground. So a lot of social media channels are filtered in various countries, including in Iran. And of course, there's very limited amount of freedom that you have regarding what you're trying to say. If an authoritarian regime wants to take things the wrong way, regardless of how much you refer to a resolution and it's an international document, when you lack the protection behind you, very bad things can happen. And I'm sure if you follow the news, you can you can trace how many horrible things have been happening to young people in our region. On that note, I would like to highlight another point, which is international indifference. That this is the point that has been really killing me as an Iranian, as a young Iranian woman in the past year, but also I think other people are experiencing it. There are lots of campaigns on social media on certain countries, and there are other campaigns on other countries that are not there. A lot of challenges happen on youth, peace and security in different countries, anything that can go into that agenda, but very little of it is being spoken. So I think the fact that we are not well interconnected, youth from these countries, and we can't report on each other's behalfs, or we can't share each other's burden, is another challenge that we have. And the last thing that I would like to mention on the point of challenges is the gender discourse. In this resolution, another point that is very, very interesting for me as a person is that women and young women are mentioned quite a few times, and me being the only woman on this panel would be a good idea to bring this point up, and to shed light on the fact that gender is really an obstacle in a region where honor killings are still going on, and we have among the most patriarchal, let's say, structures in our governments. Not that patriarchy doesn't exist in other countries; it's always going to be there, as long as we do not fight it. But it's definitely an issue to keep into account. And as for solutions to these challenges, I guess the one that I find the most applicable is to really work on the protection mechanisms. And to do that, above all, I think we need a really holistic approach and multi-stakeholder approach at the same time. So reaching out to UN offices, international organizations, and rendering governments and member states accountable, I think that would be really a good start. And building alliances and coalitions, as Leo and Mridul were saying, with civil society organizations, and as I was saying, connecting with youth across borders to have stronger networks who can vouch for you and support your work and raise awareness on what you're doing. It can get us really far and forward. And the last thing that Leo also mentioned and brought up is the reporting mechanisms, which is definitely related to the number of resolutions that we have. So as he was saying, women, peace and security, we have like 20-something resolutions that follow it, and still there are less than 100 countries who have national action plans. But if we can push the UN to report more often on youth, peace and security, then we have more educational documents going around and circulating. And that will not only encourage young people to do more research and to report more accurately through data from their fields on the ground, but it will also encourage governments and UN offices to read those reports, because, you know, sometimes it's true that we encourage the bottom to top approach, but sometimes a top to bottom approach is necessary for engaging different stakeholders. These were really my thoughts since this resolution has been coming out, and I would love to hear if anyone else has any comments and if we have time to have more reflections on this.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much for actually those comments. They're quite expansive and they're quite insightful, because they help us as well to start reflecting, especially on the gender challenge and how women still within the YPS agenda are facing different challenges that often do not get highlighted. You've also talked about issues to do with international indifference. You've talked about protection of youth. And I feel like all of these issues have been somehow highlighted by Mridul and Leonardo. And I feel like these are really cross-cutting. The point that I think has been pounded upon is this issue of protection and how important it is to actually work on the protection agenda. Because if we do not do that, then we are still actually exposing, not taking care of those already doing all the hard work to advancing this resolution. I don't know if Mridul, you have any other points that you feel like you'd like to add to what Shadi shared in terms of challenges and solutions.
Sure, I think there are few important points that we need to keep in mind, and of course the challenges are same, like Farida had mentioned, had asked, like how to do this much of awareness raising. What Leo said, people even in the UN system and in different INGOs are not understanding what this resolution says. There is a huge gap between the international global policy commitments and the national level commitments. Even the same 15 member states, which are currently the permanent and non-permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, they themselves and their bureaucrats might not be knowing enough about these resolutions back in their countries. So those kind of things are always the challenge. I think what, like, I would like to mention to Farida also is that there will always these two different tracks which are related to each other. One is country level progresses and peace in the country, and one is the global discussions. So like Leo was saying, it is something where both need to progress. but it not like these are complementing each other, but these resolutions are just tools. Like women, peace and security, not 20 but there are 10 resolutions in last 20 years, and in those 10 resolutions the progressive language has been some reinforcing languages has been, so that people are holding each other's accountable, and that's the only way to hold governments accountable, from the top down approach. But bottom up is our advocacy. So if resolutions are tools, maybe we don't promote the tools, we promote the agenda. Like we don't say we are doing webinar on Zoom, so we don't promote Zoom, we promote webinar. So in the same way, agenda is important. We focus on agenda, we work on it. I think that's the strategy what young peace builders should be having as a solution. But the huge challenge that we need to keep in mind is the ownership of young people in this global discussion. So when we see UNSCR 2250, we see the progress study, we see the We Are Here report, we see the 2419, and now we see 2535. You will see somehow, thankfully, the language has been positive in this resolution, but the number of young people who were engaged in the consultation to produce these, that has reduced significantly. Like there were so many young people who were engaged in Jordan declaration, and then we had let's say this resolution 2250, and then after that the missing piece report, I think 4,200 and something young people were involved in that. And then the whole symposium was organized for having this 2419 that and We Are Here report. And it was a time consuming process. Like significant effort were made to go deeper into the spaces, do the consultation. But here, like, I don't know how many young people were involved actually in the consultation to produce this document. The commitment by the states were made when the Security Council Secretary General's report came in April, and we got the resolution in July. So everything, and I think that was 27th or 28th of April. So between then to 14th of July, you got just 2.5 months, and within 2.5 months, you are able to produce a resolution. So somewhere young people are not involved. They are losing their ownership to this agenda. This is becoming a global, let's say, agenda which is led by UN or somewhere. But it was always young people who created, who asked for it. So they have this ownership. They need to hold the institutions also accountable in a way. Thankfully, we have a positive language, but it is not something which might work in the longer way. If this becomes strained, let's say someone else decided, okay, we want to create another resolution, and they come up with a regressive language, we will not have any say after that, because that will become like next agenda point. So we need to keep in mind, in the larger perspective, young people need to have the ownership. They need to lead this entire agenda, and the implementation. These spaces need to be youth sensitive, enough youth led, and I think that's something like that's the message which I would like to give to any viewer, that we need to be very mindful about like how these processes are being created, and are we actually losing that space or not.
Fantastic. There's definitely quite a lot of learning there, especially when you talk about youth participation at a global scale and youth ownership of these mechanisms, because at the end of the day, if it's coming to become more of resolutions that are driven by top level agencies and efforts and not significantly rooted in youth participation from below, then we are still going to face a long-term challenge of making them meaningful for the ones that are the youth and the big majority of the youth, especially in conflict contexts that, as we've all highlighted, these resolutions are quite needed. Thank you so much again. We are not going to take more of your time. This has been a very insightful and quite provocative conversation. Thank you so much, Mridul. Thank you, Shadi. Thank you, Leonardo, for making the time to join us today and to sharing your insights and your inputs. And thank you as well to all our online viewers who have been as well in this discussion. Thank you to Patrick from Guinea. Thank you to Agbor Matelo from Cameroon. Thank you to Farida. Thank you to Basma and everybody else who's joining even after this call. We really appreciate you. Maybe the very last thing I would like ask our panelists is, in the context of the pandemic, we also need to also ground ourselves with this sad reality that is affecting the world. What is one message that you'd like to give to young peace builders who are also on the front line of addressing a challenging public health issue in this particular time, especially those who, as we speak right now, have either lost a loved one or are dealing with a close relative or a member of a family that is struggling with this pandemic? I wonder if you can give a message of comfort, or if you have any word. Maybe let's start with my brother Leonardo, if you have a word to our young peace builders on the front line of COVID.
Yeah, sure. And I would like to connect that with what Mridul was saying before. Mm, for the resolutions to really happen, to be implemented, um, what we've seen that works the best is when we as young people can come together and come together in large numbers. And there I would like to bring a little example. Back in the day, Martin Luther King Jr., he was thinking like, okay, are we going to achieve our civic rights by getting a new law implemented, or by getting a movement of people working together and showing solidarity, um, to support one another? Um, and he realized that if he went the first track, it will be just a couple of people engaged there, and the ownership part, that will not be widely distributed, and people will not feel that there was their victory, their collective victory, but it will be just an issue of a few. So I think right now what's going on, and what the COVID-19 is calling us to do as young people, even as if we are in the front lines, is to start to show more this kind of solidarity, empathy, compassions for one another. And I mean, there are different ways to do it. Like I have seen some people sharing food like once a week to a larger part of the community, or doing a fundraiser to get enough medical material, for the doctors and hospital in their community. I mean, what we're doing here is through a campaign called Letters for Healing, um, sharing messages of support, sharing messages where you can really feel that even if you cannot see that person face to face, there's someone out there who really cares about you, and who thinks that your life is valuable, not because of any particular reason, but because of who you are, because you are a human being. And if you allow me, I read a small letter on that regard, because I think it really shows um, this kind of message. So just give me a sec. Yeah, it says, I might not know who you are, where you live, or what your life is like. I might not know your dreams, your desires, your talents, your ambitions. I might not know anything about you. Yet, I know that you exist. We all need love, and we all need each other's existence, a recognition of our being. Let us not forget to acknowledge our interdependence, to acknowledge our shared humanity, to acknowledge our vulnerability and responsibility, to care for our planet, to see the limitations of our systems and change them, to make them more inclusive, to benefit us all. That we're all of importance to this world, and we're all contributing, consciously and unconsciously, to its development. We do have a choice. Let us recognize the beauty in each other, and not forget that we're not the same and we will never be. Yet, in our uniqueness, we share a common ground that connects us, that enable us to learn from each other, that enable us to share, that enable us to love. Thank you for being who you are, as you are, wherever you are. We're all together in this world.
Thank you so much, Leo, for sharing that kind and very touching letter. I feel already a lot of emotions listening to that because I can relate with it. And I know that any person out there in this time really needs that, as you've pointed out, a message of comfort and a message of solidarity. But as well, let's return to Shadi and Mridul, if you have any last message to our young peace builders, especially in contexts that are still grappling, and we know there are many contexts grappling with the pandemic, but if you have any message to them as well, please.
So I'll go and I'll make it really brief. My mom got COVID and I was in Italy. I couldn't go back to my country to be with her. And for those of you who might know me close up, I've lost my dad. So this can happen to any of us. And it took me a whole month to sort it out, to make sure that she's fine, and to try to mobilize my friends and whatever we had among our relatives who were not infected by COVID to try to help and get things go smooth. So the first thing I want to mention is, if you're someone who has a relative or a friend who's got COVID, treat it as a learning experience, not because you will learn a lot of skills from it, but because it will help you mobilize what you've learned into something and put it into use. And it will take the immediate, sudden sense of helplessness and being lost away, so that you can take the time to ruminate and to understand what exactly happened to you. So the most important thing in this period, I think, and the resolution also has brought it up, is our mental health. So taking care of our thoughts, of our anxieties, of being worried about getting COVID, of being worried about what happens after we or our loved ones got COVID, and of what is going to happen to the world with this disease now going on for almost like 6-7 months, is something that is inevitable. You can't spend a day without hearing a word about COVID-19. What is important is how you cope with it and how you control it, and how you not let it, like, how you're not letting it paralyze you. Affecting is not a problem. Affecting is normal and it's human. You cannot ignore it, because if you're ignoring it, then there is something wrong. But coping with it is definitely something that we should highlight. And the last thing I want to mention is, my dissertation is on the response of a civil society organization here in Italy to COVID-19. And the message that I have for young people on a practical way, like outside the whole emotional aspect of dealing and mental health aspect of dealing with COVID, is that even in times of war, countries fail to adapt to the new normal, which explains why so many of our countries, including mine, took a long time to implement mechanisms, to do shutdowns and lockdowns, and to give out new protocols, because the system is less prone to a sudden change. They want to make sure that the measures outweigh the disadvantages. But what young people do not have is this being rooted into a frame or a structure. Young people are agile, youth are proactive, they're flexible, and they have a strong willpower and desire. And above all, they're not corrupted with certain political or financial interests that many governments are. So the key, I guess, is to being flexible, adaptable, and careful at the same time. Not really three things that are easy individually, and they're even more difficult with each other. But the good news is that all of us have this inherent, being young and being active, we all have this inherent ability to move forward, adapt ourselves to the situation, and progress. And wherever you are, if you need someone to talk to, do reach out. I'm personally available on Facebook. You can message me. And I'm sure that there are many other peers in your communities, as Leo said, with a message of solidarity, being able to listen to you and to share.
Thank you very much, Shadi, for sharing that again, and my heartfelt sympathy and word of support to you and your family in this time. I know it's quite a heavy time, and we are all here together. One thing I really love to say is, we started this call, is to be connecting with friends. And more than anything, for me, I've always considered my fellow young builders as family. And I know I've told this to so many of you that peace building for me is about first being friends and being family. And I can always stretch this to you. If you need any support from my side as well, please do not hesitate. I usually don't sleep. So if you feel like you have to talk at any time of the day, you can count on my phone to be responsive. Let's hear from Mridul as well, if you have any final message or final word to this conversation.
Yeah, I think Leo and Shadi has shared their points very beautifully. I don't want to ruin this feeling. They are much more expressive than what I am in many ways. And thanks, Leo. You always inspire me with your thoughtfulness, and Shadi with your resilience. I think you people are amazing. And thanks, Christian, for bringing all four of us here. A really lovely group to be with. In terms of the resilience, I would say to all these people who are doing this great work on ground, you are my people. My people are the people who actually see that there is this whole universe size chunk of work, and they don't feel demotivated by it, and they start just doing it. And I think you are one of those people. I see that is what Shadi is doing, that is what Leo is doing, that is what Christian you are doing. And now all of these people who are doing out there this kind of groundwork, they have also become my young people. So yeah, you have my respect. You have this sense of warmth. And the important part is that because I see there is so much of inspiration in all of your existence, it gives me more energy, more commitment to be able to do more work when you will be able to make this world again livable for us. I think I will go back with the energy, and with like this energy and your effort will always be with me and will keep me motivated for more work. So I think that's a lot, and that's what I can tell you. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much again, Mridul, for ending on that very warm note. And thank you so much to Shadi, to Leo, and to all our esteemed viewers online. Thank you for taking the time to join this conversation. It's been really a learning opportunity. We really hope that you'll take some of the inputs as well in your context. And more than anything, that you will continue taking care of yourself and taking care of your family. We are in this together. Take care, guys, and have a lovely evening, lovely afternoon, or lovely morning for you, Leo, in Bogota. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.